This is one name that keeps cropping up over and over again. It happens when I'm looking for something completely unrelated. In fact, it happened when I was researching linen in my hometown, and I was surprised considering the railway connection that this man had. It's also unfair that many are not knowing of the man that many have said standardised aspects of railway life that many took for granted. John Ramsbottom was a Yorkshire lad, born in the small but very industrious hub of Todmorden. John's father and grandfather had built, owned and was running the cotton mill in the town, and the canal that ran nearby provided all the motive power that they needed to get to the cotton market and bring the raw materials in. John had some education within the town, but it was observing his father and grandfather that gave John the eye for engineering. While tinkering at the factory, he showed real promise and had constructed several small steam engines and a small steam engine which ran about the workshop floor. He attended clubs and institutes within the town dedicated to engineering where he furthered his talents, much to the delight of the other members. This led him to put his skills to practical use for the first time and invented several machines throughout the town to help out the townsfolk. In 1834, John's first patent was accepted. He was only 19, so he had a family member take out the patent for him. It was a part for the great looms in the factory that was called the weft fork. If the weft thread was broken, either due to breakage or running out, the fork would activate an automatic stopping device. The fork could be adapted for any type of loom, saving the factory workers time, money, and more importantly, lives, as many people would perish under the running looms trying to get the weft. After a very successful period in the factory, funds were available to reshape the factory, and with it, 2 new contractors were employed to rebuild the machines. For John, having people come in from independent companies bringing new ideas were invaluable, and as he was so gifted, the contractors collaborated with John to make the new engines. It is possible that this influence may have prompted John to realise that his time in his hometown was nearing an end. He saw his chance in 1839, where he met a new acquaintance called Richard Roberts. He was a partner in Sharps, Robert and Company. It's not clear how they met, but it was likely that they met through John's patents. For a young man of 24, the allure of the city may have just been too tempting, and with his parents' blessing, he set off for Manchester. John was put to work in the locomotive department, and from there he gained his first practical skills on locomotives. Thanks to the boom, locomotive orders were flooding in. John didn't receive any formal apprenticeship, instead he learned on the spot, and he absorbed every ounce of knowledge. In 3 short years, the Manchester and Birmingham Railway had enough faith in him to make the young engineer superintendent. With the majority of the locomotives now owned by the railway, built under John's watchful eye, he was the best candidate. John would continue this role for almost a decade, even as the railway became merged into the LNWR. In the 1850s, John settled down in Barnsley and started a family. Family life must have been his muse, as he submitted no less than 6 patents, including the piston ring and the safety valve. The split piston ring, still in use in combustion engines today, but the safety valve was a revelation. All boilers, no matter how big or small, must have a safety valve to release excess steam pressure as and when the need arises. It is a safety critical factor, but if you're working with a steam engines, blowing off, as it's called, can be costly and annoying, especially if the fireman has built up the fire ready for a gradient. It means more work for the fireman to give the engine adequate steam to drive the pistons. Some early safety valves were very sensitive and would blow off with little pressure. As engines were improved and increased, the safety valves were not. Some drivers, sick of losing their steam, thought the best course of action was to tie the safety valves down. It did have the desired effect of ensuring more steam hit the cylinders, but had the undesirable effect of causing boiler explosions. Railway managers made the practice illegal and ensured that any driver found to be doing this was instantly dismissed. However, it was very hard to catch them. Many drivers would tie the valves down when they were out of sight of the yards and remove the ties before they pulled in. John knew that improvements were needed as drivers were literally putting themselves and their passengers at risk for a bit of extra steam. So he invented a new type of safety valve, but he made it in a way that it could never be tampered with. He also took the driver's thoughts to heart as well, as he made the safety valve more robust and less likely to blow off unnecessarily. At the same time, the LNWR was growing tired of using different works inherited from its mergers, but they were growing increasingly concerned at its central base of Crewe. In the end, all three superintendents, Ramsbottom, Trevivick and McConnell, were called to the board, and it was decided that two of them would need new positions. Trevivick decided to leave and was given nothing but praise and a bonus of £3,000 for his good character. John had a decision to make. He could leave, and he had a job lined up at another railway. But the LNWR had just expanded its northern division, and this included the works at Crewe. John wanted this new division, and he asked the board if he could take over Crewe instead. The board was keen in keeping his talents with the LNWR rather than go elsewhere, and so under advice from other directors and with a handshake, Crewe was his. What should have been John's happiest days at Crewe turned into his worst. In less than a week of his new post starting, his wife passed away, and within a month, he'd lost his mother. But John knew for the sake of the rest of his family, he must continue. He observed how the works worked and noticed glaring problems straight away. Each engine was built in a bespoke format. It was excellent quality, but it was slow. John needed to introduce batch production into the works. If the engines were the same, then they could be repaired the same way and use the same parts. It worked a treat, and Crewe started producing engines at a rate no one had ever seen before. In one case, over a 15-year period, the LNY DX goods class were all built at Crewe, and the works produced over 950 of them. Again, John's private life was his focus as he remarried in 1859. The bride was the daughter of fellow engineer Benjamin Goodfellow, but the wedding was bittersweet, as less than 24 hours later, John's ill father passed away. Once again, family life appeared to inspire him as he produced two new patents, including the designs for new water troughs so engines can collect water on the go. There was no doubt John could handle responsibility, so he was handed the northern region shortly after Crewe. But the LNWR wanted one railway, with one man in charge. John had proven he'd able to take on anything, and with the director's blessing, on the 22nd of March 1862, John was appointed superintendent of the entire railway. John was at the peak of his career. His reputation was far-reaching and his advancements in batch production was turning heads. John closed the South Division's works at Wolverton and enlarged Crewe and gave it its own steelworks to make it the central hub for all things LNWR, while giving Crewe John's own flair and new inventions. The extra work and the larger factory brought in 2,800 new workers and with them families, forever changing the town. In 1871, John felt his health decline and in a shock move retired from duties from Crewe. Everyone was sad to see the great man go. In the Victorian times, when a man of distinguished honour retired, they received a testimonial. A testimonial today is usually a speech or comments about the person's character. In Victorian times, they were physical objects. Now, John received 3 testimonials. The largest and most elaborate was a huge pedestal on a plinth, stunningly decorated with statues and effigies to the Greek gods in silver gilt. The testimonial was so detailed it was entered into the Great Vienna Exhibition of 1873. Now, John agreed to be kept on retainer for £1,000 a year, and he wanted to give the others a chance to have an education like he had. So John set up the Ramsbottom Scholarship at Owens College in Manchester. The scholarship was open to any young man working at the LNWR and would cover fees for over 2 years. As much as he was dedicated to his machines, learning was his equal and strongest passion. This passion passed to John's friends, and when one of John's friends passed in 1876, he left the majority of the estate to the college. John was promoted to lifetime governor and was on hand expanding the engineering department and the steam laboratory and also the medical department. But the railways were not quite done yet for John. The new Bayer Peacock Limited Company had come into fruition, and interestingly, John's name was under the board of directors. What he did on that board was unclear, but the LNWR and its new superintendent were not keen on him going to a rival. The first thing on John's agenda was the works. The old works were unable to cope with the extra loads, plus it was practically impossible to expand, so John was called upon to give his advice on a new works building. John had never had the chance to work on a new build before, so he took up the opportunity with great enthusiasm. For a man of 69, he was bright and keen to get started. After touring several prospective sites, an estate at Horwich proved the most promising. John planned the works straight away, even going as far as saying what structure had to be built first. In 1885, John became a member of the Yorkshire and Lancashire Railway Board, was elevated to director and chairman of the Works and Rolling Stock Committees, and used this to be at the forefront of the contractor negotiations. One of John's apprentices, a worker named John Aspinall, was promoted to chief mechanical engineer, and this relationship was going to be crucial in getting the works off the ground. Almost every part of the works was designed to be efficient and cater towards the three aspects of locomotive running, that is, construction, maintenance and repair. It was built ready to batch produce locomotives on a grand scale, and the first engine proudly rode off the line in 1889, a little 242 tank engine designed by Aspinall himself. In 1894, John's last official appearance in any formal capacity was a meeting at the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. By then, he was 80 years old. He was still a member of the board and could be consulted upon when needed, but in 1896, while visiting Blackpool, John fell ill. He wrote to the Yorkshire and Lancashire Railway asking to resign, but the railway persuaded him to stay. But by 1897, it was very clear he was not going to recover. So with heavy hearts, the railway accepted his resignation, and John passed peacefully a few weeks later. John was remembered by many, but the LNWR's hostility ran deep, and despite 26 years since John retired from there, no one represented the LNWR at his funeral. Today, though, it's a very different story. Dozens of John's inventions are still in use today, while others are celebrated. Horwich Works sadly no longer exists, but the buildings do and are still in use for various means. Crewe, however, is very much alive, producing modern engines. And in several museums in the UK, he is celebrated, and many railway museums still have personal items and inventions on display. With so much to his name, John will always be remembered as a great innovator and an engineering master.